Okay, I think we're in a pretty good position to start. It's 12 now. So hello and welcome everyone to our first mid-career conversations of the year. Today's session is titled Let's Talk Numbers, Salary Negotiation with Confidence and Clarity, featuring our York U alumni career coach, Sonia Shichoria. My name is Heather Auden, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement at the Office of Advancement, and I'm going to be your host for today. So I would first off like to extend a warm welcome to everyone in attendance today. Some of you have attended our sessions in the past and others may be attending your first mid-career conversations today. So welcome to all of you. For those of you attending for the first time, Mid-Career Conversations features an alumni speaker sharing their career expertise and learnings. You'll also have the opportunity to ask questions and join some virtual breakout rooms to discuss your own unique journey and ambitions with other York U alumni. Now, as this event is virtual, and since we are not all gathered in the same space, I recognize the following land acknowledgement might not necessarily be for the territory you are currently on. And if this is the case, please take the responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory you are on and the current treaty holders. As a member of the York University community, I recognize many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampa Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. Okay. The Mid-Career Conversation series was created with alumni like you in mind. It's a special opportunity for us to come together to share our stories, expertise, and experience. So first, I'm going to share a little bit of information about Sonia, our alumni career coach. She received her BHRM in 2015 and an MLCE in 2019. A proud two-time alumna, she holds an undergraduate degree in Human Resources Management and a graduate degree in Leadership and Community Engagement, and has worked in executive recruitment roles throughout Canada and the US. We are grateful today to have Sonia as today's guest speaker. So for today's conversation, Sonia is going to deliver a 20-minute talk, roughly. Then we will take questions from everyone participating today. And as always, we ask that your comments be relevant and respectful. After the Q&A, we will stop recording the session and move into breakout rooms for about 10 minutes for the networking portion of the event. Following that, we'll return to the main room for final remarks. So you're invited to keep your camera on if you feel comfortable, and we can interact with you and allow Sonia to see you when she's speaking, but you can do whatever is comfortable for you. And as per our Zoom meeting etiquette, we do ask you that you stay on mute while Sonia is speaking until the networking time begins. And then, of course, we would encourage you to unmute. Finally, consider editing your screen name to include your first name, your last name, your preferred pronouns, your degree and grad year. So for example, Sonia Shichoria, she, her, BHRM 15, MLCE 19. You can do this by clicking rename in the Zoom menu and update it there. So now, without further ado, I am very excited to welcome our speaker today. So I'm going to invite Sonia to come on screen and welcome Sonia, and I will hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. I'm delighted to be here today to be kicking off the Mid-Career Conversation series for 2026. I've got a lot of stories, a lot of tips to share with you today as my time as a recruiter, as a career coach, but also as me as an individual navigating the job market and navigating these really important conversations. So let me get my deck up here. Let's see here. Let's go into here. Perfect. So For today, we'll be talking about salary negotiations and going into these with confidence and clarity. And really, what's important to take away is that, these conversations don't have to be aggressive. They don't have to be, you showing that you're good at confrontation. Really, salary negotiation is about preparation, it's about timing and understanding how decisions actually get made. So, we'll walk through some of the background around some of these decisions to help you be more informed and build your confidence. But before we do that, it's really important for me to understand what's in the room. How are we feeling? And to understand how we feel about salary negotiations. So, a poll will get launched. What makes salary negotiations and these types of conversations feel uncomfortable for you? Is it fear of seeming ungrateful? Fear of rejection or retaliation, not knowing my market value, not knowing when or how to ask, or I've never been taught how to do this? I'll give you a minute to answer. Okay, so a little bit spread out, but very much so. I've never been taught how to do this. 33%. So, to help give a little bit of comfort to this situation, I too, someone who studied human resources management, also didn't learn this. I actually graduated, and when I was navigating my very first salary negotiation contracts, and I didn't even know that I was supposed to be negotiating until I went back to my professor because I was still finishing up my last set of courses, and I was so excited to let her know that I got this job offer. And she said, "Great, did you negotiate?" I said, "I didn't know I was supposed to." And at that point, the ink on the contract had already dried, and it was too late to go back. But we learn from our journeys, and we take that into the next situations that we find ourselves in. So I like to debunk myths. I like to put statistics behind debunking them to help with understanding this context a little bit more. So, first and foremost, some people say, if I negotiate, they might pull the offer. I can say with confidence, and again, backing up with stats, 75% of employers have stated that they anticipate applicants and those that they are in negotiations with to counter, to come back, and to negotiate. Recruiters and hiring managers have said this publicly in interviews that they're quoted in podcasts that they sit on. So it really is something that they are expecting. So, don't feel like you are, doing something that is at risk, even though it might feel uncommon for you. On their end, it's just part of their process. Number two, some people say, well, good work should speak for itself. I shouldn't have to negotiate in the interview process. That should be strong enough for them to know what I bring to the table. Well, although the interview process is a great time to, talk about your skills and really bring that to the forefront, it's really important to also understand that oftentimes as women, they don't tend to negotiate as a group itself, don't tend to negotiate. And as a result, it's showing about 30% less that women are making in their initial salary compared to men. And that can be really challenging because over the course of their career, these numbers then compound and that gap is then widening even more. Negotiation is only for senior people. Not necessarily true. I just shared that story that in my very first job, I didn't know that I was supposed to be negotiating. No one ever taught me that I was supposed to be negotiating. And that can be problematic because it's then altering where your baseline is and then impacting your baseline for future negotiations that you might potentially be going into. And next, if I don't give a number, I'm being strategic. So some people think that by not providing an answer or trying to kind of skirt around this answer in an interview, for example, that you're being strategic by trying to hold off the conversation. But this can also be a bit challenging in interviews, in particular for recruiters who work for a firm. I have this experience as well as a recruiter working for a firm, having to support different organizations, different clients, and required to provide a spreadsheet that then helps rank and qualify candidates. And there's a column there for the candidates that we're supposed to submit their salary range. And by not having that filled out, they're not as competitive, for example, because they might be deemed as maybe their realistic expectations are quite outside of what this client or organization is able to commit to right now. So that could actually remove you from an interview process by not providing a number. So we'll talk about that. But really, this isn't meant to, be difficult or make you feel like you are being difficult in the process. What actually happens is silence makes these decisions easier for someone else if you're not there advocating for yourself. Okay, the real cost of negotiating, of not negotiating. Like I mentioned before, that number that could be potentially you're missing out on then gets compounded for the rest of your career. And that's really challenging because there's another study, there's another case that was done that said even a $5,000 increase in your earlier years in your career over the whole span of your journey, your career journey, that $5,000 compounded could be missing out on about $300,000 in your entire lifetime. Now, I don't know about you, but $300,000 over my entire lifetime extra sounds pretty good to me. So this is another reason of why it's important to be advocating for yourself. So now we've debunked the myths. Now let's reframe the conversation. What is salary negotiation actually? Well, it's a business conversation. It's an opportunity to discuss alignment with the role, with the organization, with your future there. It's not necessarily a confrontation. Again, it's a conversation. And it is something that's meant to be time bound and permission based. So, yes, there are going to be opportunities that come up in your career that allow you the opportunity to do this more naturally. And we'll talk about what those three situations are and how you can have that conversation. But again, the key takeaway here is that salary negotiation or asking for a raise is not necessarily a favor that you're asking, but rather you're trying to discuss fit, and fit means scope, impact, and compensation. Okay, situation number one, you might find yourself in the interview process before an offer even comes, the question might come up. What are your salary expectations for this position? Well, let's start with the don'ts. What I don't want you to do is I don't want you to negotiate during the interview. That is not necessarily the time to be having that back and forth conversation around numbers. Really, the interview stage isn't necessarily a stage that's deemed as you've been given permission to then negotiate. That is more reserved for the offer stage. However, it's in the interview stage, recruiters and hiring managers may still ask about this. So refusing to discuss salary entirely could also impact, again, like I mentioned earlier, could impact your candidacy for the role because they might deem that your expectations are unrealistic and might not be worth the time to explore that if there are other candidates that have provided a range and the range is within what they are willing to compensate for the role. So, what I do want you to do in the interview process is before you even go into the interview, research the market for a baseline. I saw this question come up for those that wanted to have questions about the presentation. So, one of the key things to think about are there's a lot of free resources out there that you can look for these salary expectations and salary ranges. And LinkedIn and Glassdoor are free resources that you can use. For those that are interested in using AI, that's also a great resource to use because you can ask it to research from all different sources on the internet. But AI is also helpful too because location can often play an impact in salary negotiations, and that can help provide a more accurate range if you are considering different locations as well. And one of the things that you can do is you can then, if there wasn't a range that was actually provided in the job description, I know more and more organizations are going towards this, and there was a law that was recently passed specifically in Ontario to disclose salary ranges on job postings. However, not all organizations have followed suit. So, in the event that you are asked this question in the interview, it is fair game for you to turn around and say, there wasn't a range posted in the job posting. Are you able to share with me what is budgeted for this range, a budgeted range for this role at this time? And leave it at that and have them come back with a response. If they are able to give you a response on the spot and give you a bit of a range, then at that's a great time for you to say, you are comfortable with the range at this time. Whether you are or you aren't, that's one of the best things that you can say so that you can continue in the interview process. If it's really, really under what it is that you're looking for, then that's a personal assessment that you're going to have to take on whether or not you want to continue with the interview process. Because realistically, if there might be a $25,000 gap in your salary expectations at that time, then it might not be worth your time to continue with that interview process. And that's important assessment for you to make. And then let's move on to what actually happens in the offer and negotiation phase. So now you've gone through the interview, all is great. They have phoned you up to tell you that you are the selected candidate. And that is typically what happens first. You will receive a verbal offer first. And oftentimes there might be pressure on the phone to say yes right away. What you can do is you can express your enthusiasm. You want to ask for time to review the paperwork, review the contract, and have a conversation about it. Now, you'll really have to go into this process already kind of understanding what your non-negotiables are, what is really important to you versus what can be negotiated. What is your absolute minimum that you're willing to move into this role so that that aligns with you personally? Because typically what happens is that that phone call, they might be able to provide details with you over that phone call. And that's a really good opportunity to start that conversation around what it was or is that you are expecting to see out of that written contract agreement. And the reason why this is really important is because oftentimes, once the paperwork gets to you, it could be a lot. It could be very much a strenuous process for them to go back and forth with HR to make a lot of edits. So it's good to know in advance when that phone call does come what it is that you're really asking for and what your non-negotiables are and what are things that can be negotiated. And it's always great to say, I'm really excited about this opportunity. I'd love to take a day to review the offer and come back with any questions. So in the event that the phone call might not have as many details as you were hoping for, then that's another way that you can approach that conversation. Okay, the next situation is going to be asking for a raise. So you got that job, you've moved in it, you've been there for 3 years, you've been there for 5 years, you are really excelling at the opportunity, and you know that you need a change. It's time for you to ask for a little bit more and really try to advocate for yourself because of your wins. But before we have that conversation, it's important that you do an assessment to understand, do you qualify? Do you qualify to be asking for a raise at this time? And the reason why this is important is because some organizations, a lot of larger organizations, will have policies in place that impact when and how you ask for a raise. It could be during timing, certain timings that HR will then work with managers to distribute different types of raises or different types of promotions. Then you'll really want to think about your performance and your KPIs. If you are exceeding your performance, if you are excelling your KPIs repeatedly over the last few years, then yes, this warrants a conversation to your manager about what growth looks like for you. Next is, going into that conversation, really thinking about what is it that you're asking for, getting really clear on that. It could be, are you trying to change your scope? Are you trying to change your title? Are you trying to ask for a raise versus are you asking for a promotion? This distinction is really important. A raise is performance within the role, whereas performance is more so expanded scope, complexity, or leadership. And again, this is important because it ties back into company policies, timing, and getting your manager ready to have that conversation with you. Speaking of having that conversation, let's get into it. Let's talk about the details of how this is actually going to happen. I work with a lot of candidates, and they come to me and they say, Sonia, I've been in the same job for about 3 years or 5 years or 7 years, and it's really time for me to get a promotion. I really want a promotion. How come my manager hasn't promoted me yet? And the first question I always ask is, does your manager know that you want to be promoted? And they typically say no. So as a career coach, no one can help you reach your goals if they don't know what your goals are. You have to be advocating for yourself, and setting up this time to have that conversation is really important. So that's step number one, scheduling a dedicated time with your manager about this conversation. If you already have one-on-one meetings scheduled with your manager, that's great. You can let them know at your next one-on-one. At the end, you can say, would it be possible to carve out time at our next one-on-one to have a conversation about my growth at this company? If you don't have one-on-one scheduled, then this warrants an email where you could ask them for dedicated time where you talk about your future growth at that company. The reason why this is important is because as a manager, as a people leader, growing and supporting their team is essentially one of the duties. So it's not necessarily, it might just be an afterthought to them given everything on their plate. But again, coming forward and saying that you want to have this conversation and advocating for yourself is, again, really important. And that will give them about a week's time or however long in between your one-on-ones to try to think about what opportunities they could offer you, or think through, what might you ask them and how they would respond. So giving them a little bit of time to reflect on that. When you go into that conversation, you want to be really explicit about what you want. Clarity helps your manager advocate for you. Ambiguity does not. So remember on the previous slide, we talked about raise versus promotion, scope versus title. These are all things that you want to go into that conversation, getting really clear on what it is that you're asking for. Number three, you want to tie impact to outcomes. Connect your work to results at the organization that drive value. So maybe you were an earlier contributor to a project. That's fine, but that's still really important in your narrative on how you articulate your support to the team, the department, to the organization as a whole, and really trying to bring those KPIs forward to signal to them that you are ready for this growth. And number four, you'll want to wrap up that conversation and really understand process and timing. Are they going to have a conversation with their leader, with HR, and figure out next steps, figure out what could potentially be possible? When do they plan to get back to you on that? Is there any expectations from you in this process? Anything that they want you to research or you to look into? It's really important to leave that conversation knowing what both of your responsibilities are in terms of the next stage of this conversation. Okay, this is really important because I know today we're all about talking about numbers, but what's really important to consider is that negotiation is all about your total compensation package, and salary is really just one angle of this aspect here. So within compensation, there's signing bonuses, performance bonuses, equity and stock if that's available to you. But there's also things like time and flexibility, vacation days, hybrid work schedule, remote hours, flexibility, a compressed work week. Or perhaps you went through the interview process in detail, you met all these different leaders and you realized maybe the title is not a true reflection. Maybe this needs to be a bit more of a senior opportunity, or maybe I can expand the duties a little bit more given my skill set. Is that something that they're open to negotiate with? And other things like start date, parental leave top ups, wellness stipends. So, one thing to keep in mind is having a bit of a backup plan. In the event that salary is not negotiable, chances are other areas might be negotiable. And I can say this particularly true from the nonprofit sector. Oftentimes, salaries are very much capped. Going in there, there's limited budget restrictions that allow for negotiation. However, things like vacation days or professional development stipends or other things that are already budgeted that could be reallocated to support you in your compensation. It doesn't hurt to have that conversation when you are having that phone call or when you are trying to talk about a promotion or a raise within your current role. Okay, so we are nearing the end. I want to leave you with saying again, confidence isn't loud. It's more so about being prepared, knowing the right timing to have these conversations, and being really clear on your communication. The more clear you are with what it is that you're looking for, with what it is that you want, the more confidence you are going to have in going into these conversations. And that makes it a lot easier for your manager or whoever it is to support you in your journey and give you really good information to help you navigate in that way. Okay. I would love to hear your salary negotiation stories. I know that these tips will very much help you along your journey. So when you do use these tips, again, I'd love for you to reach out and just let me know. And tomorrow, we have another webinar that I will be supporting with. We are partnered with Devant, a career support platform. They have a ton of resources, a ton of tools that you can use that will support you in your job search journey. And I will be facilitating a 10-minute talk with them on 10 ways to stand out and get hired. And then Devant will then take those tips and show you using their platform how you can implement those tips into your job search for 2026. I am happy to take questions. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Sonia. That was really helpful and a lot resonated with me in my career. Had the exact experience you were talking about with negotiating salary at nonprofit, and it resulted in not more salary because they didn't have any to give, but a very great professional development opportunity that resulted from that.
Great.
So now we have time to take questions or hear some anecdotes from the audience. So please do use your chat feature, and you can submit questions through it. And if you don't even have one right away, we'll get started, and you can ask questions as we go before we go into the breakout rooms. So to start us off, what would you say are the biggest signs that it's the right time to ask for a raise?
Yes, that's a great question. So the timing piece, and I think that we kind of covered a little bit about that too. But when it comes to a raise, when you have been in the same role for a few years, and you're finding that perhaps you're no longer challenged, you have the same portfolio, you are exceeding all of the goals that were agreed upon between you and your manager, and though within those goals, there are KPIs. So I saw a question there, key performance indicators. KPIs are those sub goals within your goals that really help indicate how closely you are to reaching those goals that were set out for you. So if there's a trend that you are constantly exceeding that, and sometimes depending on the individual, sometimes they're really happy with where they are, and they're not necessarily looking for a promotion, but maybe that's a raise. So that is when you would trigger that conversation with your manager, whether you have that already scheduled or you need to schedule that in the books, having that conversation, sitting down and talking through what those key performance indicators are, what the impact was that you brought to the organization, and really being able to support in that way.
That's great. Um, how do you translate soft skills and contributions that aren't easily quantified into compelling negotiation points? So it might be hard to sort of frame as a KPI.
Yes, yes, that's a great question. And yes, some metrics, some key performance indicators do have metrics that are tied to them. But again, some of them are non-quantifiable accomplishments. And it's really important at that point. Perhaps you're working backwards or depending on what your role was in that project. But ultimately, whether or not you were behind the scenes or you played a bit of a different role that might not be as visible, it always goes back to what was your impact, really trying to answer the question of what was your impact in that example, in that situation. And this is actually an interview tip, but it's a really helpful kind of exercise to walk yourself through as you prepare for these conversations, but essentially building your hero bank, a list of examples from your career that made you the hero of your story. So some individuals will use the STAR method, but as you progress in your career, I encourage the hero bank method because, again, it ties more on the impact pieces. So you're answering the question of problem, process, impact. What was the problem that you were trying to solve? What was your process in solving the problem? And because of the effort that you did and you took on, the impact was XYZ. So once you build that for yourself, then you have tangible examples and mini case studies that you can then take to your manager.
That's great. And that's a great phrase to remember for us to keep in mind. Okay, we have some great questions from our participants. One is, do you have any tips for mothers coming back to full-time work or any parent who's taken parental leave but coming back full-time work after raising kids?
Yes, definitely. This is, not uncommon and a situation that several individuals find themselves in. And perhaps it's other types of leaves that they were off on as well. Sometimes it's educational, sometimes they're supporting other family members. This is, again, not uncommon, but it's really important, again, to go back to thinking about the impact, thinking about the contributions, and thinking about the skills that you have, and then being able to tie that into any type of recent engagements that you were in, either professional, volunteer, or whether that's doing a little bit of work on the side to upskill and to stay up to date with current trends in your industry, in your field. I think that's going to be a great way to help kind of bridge the gap because just because you haven't been in the workforce for a few years doesn't mean that you don't bring strong skills with you that you're going to then be able to support with. So I would consider, I don't want to say not consider it because it's very much something that I'm mindful of too, but going into it again with that clarity, with that confidence, and the impact.
That's great. And we have an audience member has also put a great suggestion in the chat to put manager of my last name, family services on my resume under other employment. It's a great point. And
Wonderful.
yes, all the skills you are getting as a full-time parent. Um, okay, what would be considered a reasonable time frame for a resolution to the initial conversation around growth?
Yes. This is a really good question because I would encourage you, while you're having this growth conversation, to also explore external options as well, because we don't know how long it could take. It could take months before your manager is able to sit down and meet with HR. Maybe HR has to connect with somebody else at the organization. It really depends on how big the organization is, what types of structures and policies are in the organization. For example, unionized environments might be a lot more challenging to navigate these conversations. And it's really important to know that these things do take time, but the best thing that you can do is set yourself up with many options. So explore externally so that you at least are getting an understanding of what are the ranges for the types of opportunities that you are getting interviewed for. That will definitely help you in building your confidence as well. And unfortunately, a situation might arise where that conversation at your current work has taken so long to come about that potentially a new opportunity has come up that's a lot better. And, I can share a personal story of mine as well that I was negotiating a $5,000 salary increase because I was exceeding KPIs by 4 times in one of my roles. And at the time, I had negotiated to be at the top of my band. So the only thing that my manager could do was move me into another band. But that also meant that I would be managing another employee that would be taking away from the work that I needed to do and not necessarily getting me closer to the work-life balance that I wanted. So while we were trying to negotiate what would have been a $5,000 salary increase, I was interviewing for roles that were 20, 30, $40,000 more than what my salary was at that time. So again, putting yourself out there to do that research, to explore and see what opportunities might come your way.
We have a very related question to that, which is when encountering resistance, how do you feel about getting a new offer and leveraging it to get what you want in your current role?
Yes, it can be challenging. So in the situation where I went to my manager and it was taking her about 4 months at that time to have the conversation. The holiday break was in between, so I understand that things take time, but at the same time, I was taking control of my own career journey and having those conversations. So I did have that conversation with my manager, and she then gave me her blessing to say that that is not something that can be matched and encouraged me to explore other opportunities. It will be something that you do have to really think about, but chances are a lot of individuals that I've noticed in my research, if they have then went back to their organization and said, here's a new offer that I got, and that organization then jumps on the opportunity to promote you, then it can leave you in a little bit of a interesting situation that you might not want to stay there, because why didn't they promote you 4, 5, 6 months ago when you were asking for that, but they waited until a new confirmed contract came in front of them. So that might be the opportunity that you decide it's time that you start a new chapter elsewhere. So it really just depends on the situation, and it depends on, how much do you actually really want to stay there versus is it time for you to open up your horizons a little bit more?
Yeah. Um, there's just a couple questions about whether or not this will be made available, the recording. It will be. It will be on YouTube later. So I just want to answer that for a few people that have asked. Um, Again, related, what about finding out that you're paid 60% of the person you replaced?
Yes.
What advice would you have, especially if it's a lower paying job?
Yeah, that is immediately a conversation that you want to have with your manager at again, coming with your points and really trying to think it through. What I would encourage you is to avoid any type of like office politics or like trying to gossip about it, because again, you want to maintain your professionalism. And if it is an organization that you do want to stay with, then potentially there's a conversation there that needs to be made. And at 60%, then I'm thinking from a like a senior leader perspective that there must have been changes made to the role. So maybe the scope, maybe the duties might have been slightly different, and that's contributing to why it was banded at a much lower rate than the predecessor. So again, having a conversation, look at every conversation as an opportunity to get facts, to get information so that you can build your case and grow your knowledge, and not look at it as a conversation where, a decision needs to be made by the end of our meeting today. But again, fact
Yeah.
finding for yourself.
Okay, great. I'm gonna try to get through a few more because there's some really wonderful questions here. Um, Someone is switching right now from contract to permanent and wondering, is this a good time to ask for a range? They said the range is still low, but the university budget may impact their ability to change it.
Definitely. Definitely. And if this is within a university, then I'm also mindful that you might be within a union. So that again will then band you into what your salary range is that you are available to unlock or tap into. So My recommendation is thinking through the other if that is your situation where it's a little bit more confined and restricted, then thinking through some of the other things. Is it more so looking at the position and thinking about what duties can you take on that will allow you to grow your skill set in an area that you really want to? Maybe there's a conference or professional development opportunities that they can support your journey in being able to take on those types of opportunities. So sometimes in these environments, and trust me, I've been there being in the nonprofit sector, you got to be a little bit creative, but thinking through some of those alternatives of, if they can't meet me at this exact salary, then what are the other things that we can look at that will help me with my professional development and with my goals?
Great. Okay. I'm going to sneak in one last question because it's a good one. And I think a lot of people here will relate to it. And then we'll go into our breakout rooms. I've been asked my salary expectation in round one interviews almost every single time, while the recruiter has declined to reveal it. If a range isn't mentioned on Glassdoor ad and in Glassdoor or an ad, and the range is very vast, you feel like you run the risk of rejection from asking for too much or underselling yourself by providing too low of an amount. So once I say the range and they reply with it's within budget, I worry I've left an unknown sum on the table. Any suggestions for that scenario?
Yes, and that is really tough. And that's unfortunate that the recruiter won't at least provide you a range. I've been in situations and I've encouraged others that at the end of round one, that to at least be able to confirm what a range is, because ultimately that's your time, that's the recruiter's time, that's the hiring manager's time. So getting really clear and seeing if they can come back to you before the second round interview with what that range is so that you can make that decision. Again, try your best to put the ball back in their court for them to get you that information. And especially if this is a position that's in Ontario, then perhaps citing the new laws that came in to really put the onus back on HR to say, if we are moving forward, I would just like to get clear on the range so that we're making the most of both of our times together. And just framing it in that professional way. And trust me, as a recruiter, I would value that conversation as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, well, thank you very much for all of those responses and all of your questions. We are now going to move to the networking portion of our event. And I do encourage you to stay on and connect with your peers because there's so much to be gained from connecting with a fellow alumni. So in a few moments, you're going to be prompted to join a breakout room with 2 or 3 other alumni. You're going to have 10 minutes to connect, and then you can come back after a few minutes and to the main room, and we'll give some final remarks. Okay, and now our staff is going to send you to your breakout room. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you all had a chance to connect and learn more about each other. I want to thank everyone for joining today, and thank you again to Sonia for joining us and sharing some really great insights with our audience today. So this concludes our Mid-Career Conversations virtual event for today. Thank you again for all attending. I do want to let you know before you go, though, that Mid-Career Conversations will return soon. Stay tuned for details on our next guest speaker to be announced on our website and over email. If you are looking for more opportunities for growth, learning, and networking, we have an exciting event lineup scheduled for the next few weeks. So you, of course, heard already about tomorrow's event. And we also have on Wednesday, January 21st, so on this Wednesday, join us online for Genomics, Artificial Intelligence, and Personalized Healthcare, the Canadian Story, as part of our Scholars Hub series. For these events and others that are being offered, you can visit yorku.ca/alumni and friends. And don't forget to update your information on our website or just via our email address to reconnect and stay in touch if you have any changes to your info. And that is it for today. I again want to thank everyone for coming. Thank you for all your wonderful questions and participation. And we hope to see you again soon. Take care.